Chelsea fans, after that disappointing 2-1 loss to Fulham, Chelsea lose grip on the second place position they were holding, and this defeat stings. Chelsea had an opportunity to close the gap to Liverpool to just 1 point if they secured a victory at home to Fulham, which we were all expecting, but it wasn't meant to be. It honestly was a tale of two halves. There were a lot of positives and a lot of negatives that I want to talk about today. So in today's video, we're going over the 5 things that we learned from Chelsea 1, Fulham 2.
Did you know that 90% of the people watching this video right now are currently not subscribed to the channel? So make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you're a Chelsea fan who enjoys Chelsea content. Make sure you join the community and let's get into the video.
The first thing I want to talk about is a near perfect first half display. We played some outstanding football in that first half and we genuinely looked like one of the best teams in the league. The second half is something we'll talk about later on in the video, but for the first half, it really needs to be highlighted how good we were. You had players like Pedro putting in an absolute shift. Caicedo, Cucurella, outstanding as always. Palmer was just being this world-class magician in that first half. His goal, unbelievable. We'll talk about Cole Palmer specifically later on in the video. But that first half display, we really set the pace. We came out of the blocks. The first few minutes we were kind of, oh, do we go for it, do we not? But after that, we dominated, we created chance after chance. Unfortunately, we didn't take enough chances to kill the game off, but the way we were playing football in that first half was so nice to see. It was Maresca ball in full flow, and it was just something that needed to be highlighted. And like I said at the intro of this video, it was a game of two halves. The second thing I want to talk about is Cole Palmer makes history. He scored 26 league goals for Chelsea in 2024, and he breaks Jimmy Floyd's Hasselbank of 25. This guy is an absolute wizard, a magician with the ball, a freak of nature when it comes to football, considering how young he is and how good he is. Now, a lot of people in my comment section were getting on his back after the goal, but I just want to take some time to talk about that. It was so Eden Hazard-esque. He picks the ball up and creates a goal out of nothing. He skips past 2 or 3 players and just cool and calmly passes the ball into the net from outside the box. And he just showcased how 1 second in a game he can change. He can take the game by the scruff and create something that leads to a goal, whether it's an assist or getting the goal himself. He was fantastic in that first half. He was everywhere and he was really stitching the ball together with the attacks and, you know, when we're moving forward from midfield. But Cole Palmer breaking another record in a Chelsea shirt. It's mad to think he's only been playing for Chelsea for 18 months and he's just been dropped in, dragged us up from 12th to 6th last year pretty much on his own, and he's continuing this insane form he's had this season with a different manager in a different squad, well, slightly different squad, with a different system and different position. This guy is absolutely magic, and we will never run out. We're going to run out of words about how we can describe him, but honestly, this guy's goal today, unreal. The third thing I want to talk about is the atrocious second half performance. What a difference half-time can make. Now, we saw this time and time again last season under Pochettino, where we would play okay in the first half on some games we would just get completely destroyed. But when we were playing well in the first half, we would come out in the second half and just be a completely different team. And this is one of the first times I've seen this under Enzo Maresca, but the second half, we just didn't come out of the changing rooms. We were a completely different side. Fulham wanted it more and absolutely destroyed us across the park. Our defending went to pot. The midfield just had no substance at all. You still had key players like Cucurella who become a lot more. He had a lot more mistakes in him in that second half, but he was still of a high standard as a Chelsea player in that second half. Caicedo is always Caicedo. It seems to be the players around him. Cole Palmer was quite frustrating to watch in that second half because he couldn't create too much more than what he did in the first half. Again, such a difference in the team performance. The only performer for me, which we'll talk about in depth later in the video, is Pedro. He had, for me, he was the best player on the pitch today. He was outstanding, and we'll talk about him in a bit more in depth in a little while. But the second half performance, man, to concede 2 goals at home, to lose in the manner that we did, was just, it was sloppy all across the park. It wasn't individual errors, it was a team error. We just didn't want it. We didn't put our foot on the gas. We kind of become very complacent early on in the second half, and Fulham turned up and went, hang on, there's something in this game for us. And they've gone on and they've actually got the result. And it's the first time that Fulham have beat us in 45 years, which is just wild when you think about it. but the second half performance was absolutely atrocious. The fourth thing I want to talk about is Enzo Maresca's game management. He got this hideously wrong against Fulham today. Not because of who he started, not because of the team that played, not because of the tactics, well maybe some of the tactics in that second half, because we needed to adapt and the game needed an injection of pace and a different dynamic. And I will say, throughout the season, Enzo Maresca has been very proactive in making changes when he sees something. So it was very strange to see against Fulham in that second half where we were getting ran through time and time and time again. And you could see that Fulham were getting into the game more. They then scored the equaliser and they were knocking on the door for a winner. Enzo Maresca makes one substitute. He makes one substitute in a 90-minute period, and he brings off Jackson for Nkunku. Now, Jackson, yes, he missed a couple opportunities. I think his link-up play was good, and I think the way he brings the ball up from midfield into that final third, he always does very well. It's very rare that he doesn't do that well. But it wasn't his day today, and that's fine. But taking him off for Nkunku in the last, 10-15 minutes, it's not enough time for Nkunku to make an impact. And Nkunku isn't a backup striker. I'm sorry, he's not. He's a very technical player, he's a creative player, but at the moment, he feels like another Kai Havertz in a Chelsea shirt. Where do we play him? He's not a striker, he's not a 10, he's not a winger. Where's his best position? So I found it very strange that Maresca didn't make any changes earlier in the game. Maybe taking off Sancho, moving Neto across and putting on Noni Madueke for just a different dynamic for someone out wide. We're not rotating any of the defenders. We're not rotating any of the midfielders. It didn't make sense. A lot of people are screaming for João Felix to get more game time. And I think a game like yesterday was a perfect opportunity to introduce him early on in the second half. Whether you play him in off the left, whether you do actually take Cole Palmer off and put on Felix for 25 minutes left of the game. It just screamed out for something to change. And Maresca has said, he trusts his players, he trusts the squad, and they've got to go make the difference. And I totally agree. Because 9 times out of 10 this season, we have gone on to get the result. But against Fulham, honestly, you could see that nothing was changing. And anything, you could see that Fulham were coming to us more and more and more. And we thought, we're going to lose this game because nothing has been changed. So unfortunately, Maresca, red box for this poor in-game management. And before we get into the fifth and final thing that we learnt from Chelsea 1, Fulham 2, I have 2 honourable mentions. And the first honourable mention is Robert Sanchez actually had a fantastic game. Now, hear me out, because I know there's a lot of people, including myself, that get on Robert Sanchez's back. And rightly so, because some of the mistakes he makes, and he brings a lot of pressure on himself unnecessarily. He made some incredible, big, huge saves in this game to keep us in it when we were 1-0 up and to keep our clean sheet as long as he did. Now, in my personal opinion, there was nothing he could do about those 2 goals we conceded because it wasn't an individual error, it was a team error. It was not dealt with throughout the defensive line, the midfield, or with Robert Sanchez now included in that back line when I mention it. The first goal, okay, cool, he could potentially have got a stronger hand to it to keep it out. But in reality, it wasn't dealt with before that header came at Robert Sanchez. It should have been dealt with. The second goal, yes, people are saying he's hoofed it up the pitch and he could have just made a nice little pass to Tosin and it's problem solved. I understand that, and yes, it's very frustrating because we just gave the ball back to Fulham. But once Fulham received the ball on the halfway line, our team just didn't deal with it. Didn't deal with it at all. The ball comes straight back up the pitch and we concede. It's one of those things. Fulham did very well on the counter, and when they broke against us, especially later on in that game, we looked tired, we looked passive, we just looked like we didn't know what we were doing. It was a reflection on some of the games last season under Pochettino where we did all the hard work and then we just crumbled. But in terms of Robert Sanchez's overall performance, we know his distribution's terrible, but he had some good spells and good moments at the back with his shorthand distribution at least. And there was one opportunity, or one thing to talk about where he nearly passed it straight to a Fulham forward. Fair enough. Gets away with it, so we don't have to highlight it too much because he got away with it. Made some huge saves, and it shows that he is making improvements. And I kind of feel bad for him when you concede 2 goals, because on the surface, you go, oh, well, Chelsea need a new goalkeeper. But the reality is, it was the 2 goals we conceded were a team calamity. That's what it was. It wasn't individual errors, at least in my opinion. But I think that Sanchez does deserve an honourable mention because he did play very well for massive, massive spells of that game, and he didn't make any silly mistakes. If you want to count the fact that he's hoofed up the pitch for the second goal and Fulham have received it on the halfway line as a Sanchez mistake, cool. The way I see it is, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. Decision making could have been better. But when the opposition team receives it on the halfway line and the team still don't deal with that threat, that's not a goalkeeping error in my opinion. The second honourable mention is creating bad history. This is a short one because Fulham haven't beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge for 45 years. And yes, you could say on paper, easy 3 points. A lot of Chelsea fans have been saying our run of games in the last 10 games, when you look at it, we should be winning every single one and accumulating 30 points from them 10 games. Now, myself, I thought Everton's going to be a tough test, and I thought Fulham will be a tough test, and I still think we've got Crystal Palace in amongst these fixtures. That's going to be a massive test, especially away at Selhurst Park. But creating bad history is not good. We have been getting so used to, with Enzo Maresca taking over and how well we've been doing, to be creating good history and breaking these moulds and setting new standards for ourselves. But Fulham beating us at Stamford Bridge in 45 years is just not, it's just not good for history. You know, it's one of those things where we always beat Fulham. They are our rivals. You can throw a stone to Craven Cottage from Stamford Bridge. That's how close we are. And we got battered in that second half. It wasn't even like they nicked it at the end. They deserved the win. They fully deserved it based on a poor second half performance. So I had to have an honourable mention of creating bad history, because they are going to love the fact that they've come to Stamford Bridge and picked up 3 points for the first time in nearly half a century. So it just needs to be highlighted that creating bad history is never good, because now we will always remember that game for that reason. And the fifth and final thing that we learned from Chelsea 1, Fulham 2 is Pedro Neto is absolutely outstanding when it comes to defensive work and offensive work. I genuinely thought he was the best performer on the pitch against Fulham. Defensively, he's basically playing right back. Now, Malo Gusto did not have a good game, right? He didn't have a game to the standards that we set Malo Gusto, and the standards he probably sets himself. So Pedro Neto found most of his time defending at right wing back and attacking, and he was absolutely outstanding. He was everywhere throughout the whole time he was on the pitch. Now, I understand you had Robinson, who's got a lot of pace and he's an attacking left back. So Neto is obviously, his job is to deal with him and also everything behind him to kind of help out with Gusto. But Pedro Neto was everywhere. And honestly, like, there was some people saying during the game, is Pedro Neto the best defensive right winger in the world? Because honestly, we have never seen anyone move like that in a defensive manner. In the world is a bit of a stretch. I get it. It's always in the heat of the moment and quite reactionary, but they have somewhat of a point. Pedro Neto's defensive work goes so unnoticed, and I think that's why he started over Noni Madueke. I like Pedro Neto. He's electric. He's very direct. He's always trying to create something. He's ambidextrous. He can use both feet very comfortably, but he also puts in the graft defensively, and it really was highlighted against Fulham. And I just feel like it should be highlighted in this 5 things that we learn, that Pedro Neto is not only great going forward, but fantastic when it comes to the defensive dirty work. So those are the 5 things that we learned from Chelsea 1, Fulham 2. Do you agree with my analysis? Do you disagree? Have I missed something? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I love having a conversation with you guys. And if you have made it this far to the end of the video, there'll be a thumbnail that pops up on the screen. So if you are a Chelsea fan who enjoys Chelsea content, make sure you click that thumbnail because you'll enjoy that video too.